amazing guest, and I want to dive right into this. Drew Smith, who many of you know from all the interesting things that he's done with us on webinars, the things that Drew has done on LinkedIn. Drew, I'm super excited to have you. Thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you so much for bringing some practical, grounded wisdom. I'll hand this over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for letting me join here and for being a part of this campaign. So just a little bit about me before we get into it. I'm the CEO and founder of Attributa. We're a consulting firm that specializes in B2B attribution. And so we've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I'm really excited to share what I've learned about building a reporting ecosystem that leads to insights as opposed to just leading to more work. Yeah, really looking forward to getting things going. So let's talk a little bit about our learning objectives and what you should be coming away from this session with. So number one, we're going to help you figure out which metrics to focus on. I can't tell you which metrics your organization should be focusing on because every organization's different. But I can give you a framework that helps you figure out which metrics are important for your organization. We're going to talk about how to generate the necessary data to report on those things. We're going to talk about how to figure out how frequently you should be reporting on these metrics. Again, every organization is different. So it's not about giving you an answer. It's about helping you figure out the answer for your organization. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to articulate the marketing performance narrative. And then throughout this entire presentation, we're going to make call outs to how to reduce those special requests and needs to reduce scope creep. So quick check, who has gotten a late Friday request from a marketing leader that says, hey, I need this report and I need it by Monday morning? Lots of us have, I'm sure. If you're not raising your hand in the chat, you're probably raising your hand and I can't see you. But we've all gotten those things. And this framework is going to help you reduce the number of those types of requests because it's going to be predictable in nature. So let's start with trying to figure out which metrics to focus on. This next slide here is probably the single most important slide of this entire presentation. And it is that marketing reporting should always strive to be both interesting and useful. Interesting and useful. I'm going to define those terms. Interesting means that something is important, which changes based on the recipient. The key thing on this is that what's important or interesting to me might be different than what is important or interesting to somebody else. So think about like an email marketing manager. What's interesting to them? Is that the same thing that's interesting to a CRO? Absolutely not. So you have to tailor what you're going to report on based on who is going to be the recipient of that data. Now, the next piece is useful. And this is probably the one that most marketers forget to account for. And useful means that it's something that can lead to meaningful action. If I can look at something and understand it and learn from it, but I can't take action from it, how useful is that thing? How important is that thing? Should I even be reporting on that thing? This is a little bit of a framework that we like to use when we're getting requests to build reports because we want to, eat our own dog food and make sure that we're, doing the same things that we think others should be doing. So we use this matrix to figure out, is this thing useful or is this not useful? Is it interesting? Is it not interesting? The area that most marketers focus on, quite frankly, which is not as impactful, is a lot of marketers focus on the stuff that's interesting but not useful. These things a lot of times get categorized as our vanity metrics. They're vanity because they're really good to know and they're interesting and they make for a compelling slide, but we can't really action off of them. Let me give you a really, really clear example of something that's interesting, really, really damn interesting, but also really, really not useful. So I was working with a client who was implementing some new software to enhance their attribution reporting. And this client's in a niche industry where they've got this specific ad type that's for their industry. And this certain ad type for their industry has three different ways of essentially responding to the ad. Option one is to click the link in the ad. That's kind of like, the basics. So you click the link in the ad. That's one way to respond to the ad. The next one is to click to call. So it's got a phone number with the click to call link embedded. So you can click to call or tap to call. And then there's also a button that allows you to engage in a live chat. This is all on an ad. So we were setting up some systems and some processes to be able to track the performance of these ads. And the client said, hey, can we put something into this process where it'll enable us to track which response type these people used, whether it was the clicking on the link or the phone call or the live chat. And I thought about for a second, and I went and looked at this matrix, and I said, okay, that's really interesting. It's really interesting to know which response type somebody is going to, people have used, particularly knowing which response type is correlated with more pipeline or more deals or a higher win rate or things like that. Really interesting. Would be great to know. But what's the action that I can take from that? The only action I can take from that is if there's one that's underperforming, to take that away as an option. But that would conflict with every amount of buyer research that's been done over the last 5 to 10 years, that buyers want you to meet them where they are. They want to be able to control how they interact with you, not you control how they interact with you. So you're not going to take any action off of that information. It's super interesting, but you can't do anything with it. So in that scenario, we pushed back and said, we don't think we should do this because one, it's going to require a lot of effort. And two, ultimately, you're not going to be able to do anything with it. It's super interesting, but you can't take action. So we don't think you should be doing this. Fortunately, they agreed with us and decided not to do that. But that's a really good example of something that is interesting, like really, really, really interesting, but you can't action upon at all. So is it really that worth it? Probably not. So now, the way that we recommend that you structure this reporting strategy that you're going to build, now that you're thinking about things through the lens of what is interesting and useful, what you're going to do is you're going to start this iterative approach, where the first step that you're going to do is you're going to outline your reporting requirements. I know a lot of folks on this call are probably familiar with requirements gathering and documenting requirements, but most of us probably haven't done this in the context of reporting. So we want to do the same thing that we do for other things, which is gathering requirements, but apply it to the lens of reporting. Then what we're going to do is we're going to select from those requirements what we're going to report on and what matters. The requirements tell you what you're going to report on and the why you're going to report on it. There's certain aspects to requirements documentation that we're going to share in just a moment that give you both the what and the why. So this is kind of how we structure reporting requirements. First off, you start with your priority level. The priority level obviously dictates what we're going to start with and what we're going to just put into the bucket of like, hey, this isn't even interesting or useful, so we're not going to do it. And then you move to as a, and this is where you document the person's role. This is the audience, the recipient of that report or metric. This is how you make sure that it's interesting to a specific person. Next up is I must. This is the I must be able to report on XYZ. That's the what are we reporting on? Then you add the so that. The so that is very specifically, what are you going to do with this information? Why do you want to report on it? The so that documents how this is going to be useful. If you can't give me a compelling argument as to why this is going to be useful, I'm going to tell you that it's optional. And then you have the frequency. And the frequency is how often are we going to report on this thing. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about frequency in just a moment. So if you've got questions about how to manage the frequency and how to figure out what the right frequency is, we're going to get there. So this is the starting point for your reporting requirements. And this is what reporting requirements turn into. Priority level, P1, must have. As a CMO, I must be able to understand how channels influence pipeline so that we can optimize our budget to channels that perform best. And the frequency of this is going to be quarterly. That is a fantastic requirement. P2, need to have. As a VP of demand gen, I must be able to understand conversion rates from leads to MQLs to ops so that we can figure out which of our channels and tactics does the best job of converting. Frequency, biweekly. Priority level P3, nice to have. As a field marketing manager, I must be able to understand the ROI of each trade show so that we can optimize our trade show budget. Frequency of that's going to be monthly. P4, optional. As a marketing ops manager, I must be able to track how quickly MQLs get assigned to SDRs so that we can ensure that there are no bottlenecks or leaks in our funnel. Frequency of that is biweekly. So this is what good reporting requirements look like in the wild. Now, in the resources inside SQL here, we've got a link to a requirements template. So we're not just going to make you build this on your own. We're going to give you the template. So we've got a link to a reporting requirements template that we use here at Attributa that you can download. Take what you like, what you don't like, get rid of it. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Hopefully you find at least one thing in this template that you like and can use, but feel free to download it and use it. Now, yes, user stories. No, we still need user stories. That is correct. Even for reporting, we need user stories. So now let's talk about the next step. Now that you have your requirements, what we need to do next is we need to start writing out questions that our reports will answer. These questions determine how exactly we're going to meet our requirements. This is a critical step because if you go back to this, let's look at this first one. Be able to understand how channels influence pipelines so that we can optimize our budget to channels that perform the best. That's a really compelling requirement, but it doesn't tell you how we're going to meet the requirement. The questions determine and document how we're going to meet the requirement. So let's look at some questions. Question number 1, for ops graded last quarter, how many were marketing sourced and where did they come from? That is a very narrow and specific question. What makes this question so good is that if you write your questions well, what you end up with is you can start visualizing exactly how I'm going to create this report. So I know my date time field on the report is going to be related to opportunity creation date, which is going to be last quarter. How many were marketing sourced? Well, okay, that's another data point I need on the report. And where did they come from? Okay, which source did they come from? That's another data point I need on the report. You can start visualizing how to build the report. Now, I'm gonna jump ahead actually, and I'm gonna move to number 4, which is how did marketing activities from Q1 influence pipeline? So question number 4, how did the marketing activities from Q1 influence pipeline? These two questions, 1 and 4, both ladder up to this very first reporting requirement. We want to understand how channels influence pipeline. They're approaching it from different perspectives. Question 1 is approaching it from the perspective of the opportunities created in last quarter. And question 4 is approaching it from the perspective of the marketing activities that happened in Q1. So your date field is going to be different. Your date field is going to switch from the opportunity creation date to the activity date of the marketing activity. It still ladders up to the same requirement though. So you will have one requirement with multiple questions that show how we're going to meet the requirement. Question number 2, what were the dispositions of last month's MQLs? Again, super narrow question, really easy to build the report. When you have narrow questions, report building is really, really easy. When you have vague, non-specific questions, report building is very, very difficult. Question number 3, for the deals we won last quarter, so closed won date equals last quarter, Which ones were influenced by marketing and by which channels? Great. That's an easy report to build. Again, very narrow. Question number 5, which trade shows did we do in Q3 of last year and how much in bookings did they source? Again, a very narrow, specific question. One of the things that you're going to notice here is that we avoid vague and ambiguous terms like perform or engage. Perform can mean a million things. So if somebody ever puts the word perform into one of these questions, that's already a red flag that the question is not specific enough. We need to define performance specifically. So good questions have very, very specific terms with that are very well defined. Bad questions use vague, ambiguous terms that are very difficult to define. So you got to make sure that these are very, very specific questions. Now, once you've got your questions done, so now you've got your reporting requirements that show what we're going to report on and why we're going to report on it. Now you've got your questions that outline the how are we going to actually meet that requirement. The next step is that we have to actually determine, can we do any of this? Because again, just like last time, how many people have gotten a reporting request from a marketing leader that says, hey, I need you to report on the velocity between MQL and opportunities. And you're like, we don't track that. We literally can't build that report because we don't track that. Everybody put your hands up. We've all had those types of requests come in, right? So like, how do we, so in order to prevent those from coming in and us being reactive, we proactively do this assessment. So what you're going to do is you're going to do some data engineering and you're going to do a mini assessment of every single requirement and all the questions that roll up under the requirement to determine if we can meet that need. If we can, great, perfect, we can build those reports. If we can't, you can clearly state why we can't and what the process is to get there, so that you are now starting to build out your reporting capabilities roadmap. Well, we can't report on velocity from MQL to opportunity because we don't track X, Y, and Z, but here are the steps that we can take to get there. And if somebody greenlights this, then it'll take us 2 months to be able to actually meet this need. When you do this mini assessment, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a proactive position to say, don't even ask me for this report or this data point or this KPI because I've already assessed it and we can't actually fulfill that. We can't fulfill that request. We can't do it. Here's why we can't do it. And here's what the roadmap looks like to get it done. So until that gets approved, you can't even request this. So all those requests for the stuff that you can't do, gone, because we've proactively assessed what we want to report on, why we need to report on it, how we're going to report on it, and we've assessed we can't meet that need right now. So this is going to reduce those ad hoc requests because you're getting ahead of it and saying, yeah, don't even bother requesting this report. Now, when you do your mini assessment, there's really 3 key things that you want to outline. Number 1 is the current process. How do we currently track this thing, if at all? So what is the current tracking? What does the current tracking look like? Okay, we use this field on this object and this field on this object, and then we can run a calculated field report in Salesforce that does this. Cool, great. That's current process. Notes. The notes are going to tell us anything about, if we can't do this thing, how do we get there? And then you're going to just put a little indicator on there of whether this is possible or aspirational. Possible means we can achieve this goal today. Aspirational means we cannot achieve it, but we hopefully will one day. So you are now documenting 3 things here in addition to your requirements, which is what is the current process that we use to track this thing? Is it possible or aspirational? And here's the notes on if we can't do it. Here's the specifics on why we can't do it and how to get there. So now all of this is documented. The ultimate outcome of this exercise, again, is that we are extremely clear and proactive in what we can report on and what we can't report on. And for the things that we can't report on, what is it going to take to get there? This helps build that roadmap of what we're going to be doing in the future and at what point in time we might be able to meet a requirement that we can't currently meet. Now, the frequency. This is so important. Frequency is going to tell us how often we're going to report on these things. And it's important because you have to make sure that number one, we're giving things enough time to have meaningful change. Like, again, raise your hand or comment in the chat if you've ever run a campaign and some leader somewhere, probably in sales, like 24 hours after the campaign launches, comes in and goes, cool, how many leads do we have and how much pipeline do we have from that campaign that launched 4 hours ago? Nothing. We have nothing. Why not? Because time, I mean, it's just time. Things take time. So if you want to make sure that we give things enough time for meaningful change, you have to get your frequency right. Also, at the same time, we don't want to wait too long that we miss opportunities to course correct. Let me give you a really good example of this. So I've worked with this one client for almost 10 years now, and we actually did this whole framework together. It took us like 12 months to get through, which was the first time I used this framework. And this won't take you 12 months to get through, I promise. It was just very first time. Took a lot of heartache and pain. And I thought they were going to fire me like 12 times. So, and I thought they hated me. But we got there and I built this framework to make this whole process easier. But ultimately, so we worked with this client. We built out this framework. We knew everything we wanted to report on. We had built all the stuff. Everything was easy. They had an ad agency, and that ad agency was launching a new campaign that was a direct response campaign. As a matter of fact, the campaign linked to a landing page that had a bunch of information about the product and had a request a demo form on the page. So for this, because of the nature of the campaign that it links to a request a demo form, we knew that getting to MQLs would be a really, really quick metric. And that even starting to see some pipeline coming from those MQLs would be a pretty quick metric. So we set a check-in date of 30 days. So we're going to say after the campaign launches, we're going to wait 30 days, then we're going to do a check-in to see how much pipeline we've gotten from this campaign to see what we can learn. So we did the 30-day check-in. At the 30-day check-in, we looked in Google AdWords. Everything's looking great. Really, really great. Really, really great click rate. Really, really great response rate. Cost per lead was super, super low. Conversion rate super high. I mean, all the vanity metrics, all the super top of the funnel metrics looked fantastic. So we ran the report of how much pipeline. 0 pipeline. Uh-oh, we have a problem. So we went and checked then all the operational stuff. So we checked to make sure that the form fill worked properly and that the record was created in Marketo. Yes, it was. Okay, so then we looked at, okay, did they get the 100 points in the lead scoring program for submitting a request a demo? Yes, that worked. Did they MQL properly in reaction to the 100 points? Yes, that worked. Were they assigned properly to the sales reps? Yes, that worked. Did the sales reps actually work then? Yes, they did. Okay, cool. So what's the problem? So we went and we looked at how the sales reps had dispositioned these records. And 100% of these records were disqualified due to them being a bad ICP fit. Okay, that's a red flag. Okay, cool. So on the call, this whole process took us about 15 minutes because we'd already built all this architecture. So on the call, the ad agency immediately paused the campaign. We were able to go back and fix it. What we found is that actually the image on the landing page was like this quaint looking like a corner flower shop. And this particular organization doesn't sell to that type of a customer. So the image told people that are flower shops and barber shops and nail salons and stuff like that, that this is for you when this company doesn't sell to that profile. So we had to go back, the ad agency had to go back and redo the image and made a couple of tweaks to the copy on the landing page. And then we relaunched the campaign. We did another 30-day check-in. And this time, all the vanity metrics had flipped. Cost per lead had gone through the roof. Conversion rate plummeted. It looked like we made really, really bad changes. But when we looked at the pipeline thing, we were starting to see some pipeline. Now, what's cool about this is that normally when we launch an ad campaign, that thing's going to run for 2, 3, 6, 9 months without anybody even looking to see what kind of pipeline we have. You're going to burn so much money while you wait to figure out, is this thing working or is it not working? So the goal is to get your frequency to be the right, that sweet spot that you've got enough time for meaningful change, where we could see 100% of these people were DQ'd because of a bad ICP fit, but we don't wait too long that we miss opportunities to course correct, meaning we didn't wait 6 months and burn through a bunch of cash that we wasted on these ads. That put us in a really proactive position. Now, it also ensures when you get your frequency set, it also ensures that everyone knows when we're going to report on something, because the meeting is already scheduled on the calendar. The meeting to see the output of the reporting is scheduled. This again helps reduce the special requests you get, because if we have a meeting scheduled on Wednesday and the frequency for this particular report or data point or review is let's say it's weekly and it's Monday, and somebody knows they're going to get the report on Wednesday, are they going to come ask you for that report on Monday? No, of course not. They're going to wait till Wednesday, because we always do it on Wednesday. We do it every Wednesday. So just wait till Wednesday. So again, if you set your frequency and you put these things on a calendar, everybody's going to know when they're going to get that data point. And so you're not going to get a lot of those special requests. Now, different things are better reported on with shorter and longer time frames than others. So you're going to think in terms of like weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and quarterly. Now, again, I can't tell you what the right frequency is for your organization, because every organization is different. If you're selling, I think somebody mentioned blenders, if you're selling blenders online, then you need to report on things very, very, very frequently. You need to report on things daily. But in the B2B SaaS world, particularly if you're selling into like large enterprises, 6-figure, 7-figure deals into large enterprises, if you're reporting on pipeline and sales daily, you're wasting time. It's too frequently. So everybody's different. So what you have to do is you have to find out what's the right mix for you. Now, when you set your frequency, this also gives us the ability to create context and cohorts. Context and cohorts are how you compare results against other previous timeframes. That's what helps you create the context of, is this good or is this bad? So if I were to come to you and say, we influenced $3 million in pipeline last quarter, woohoo, that's great. We influenced $3 million in pipeline last quarter, but we influenced $5 million in pipeline the quarter before that. Oh, well, now that $3 million doesn't look so good. But wait, in the same quarter last year, we influenced only $2 million in pipeline. So now that $3 million actually starts to look good again. So depending on the context that we're looking at, that $3 million, whether it's good or bad, changes, right? It starts out good, then it goes to bad when we add the context to $5 million in the previous quarter, but then it goes back to good again when we bring in the context of $2 million in pipeline the same quarter last year. Now, another thing to talk, let me just give you a really great example of context here. So at the beginning of my career, I worked for a company that sold computer hardware and software into other businesses. They also sold into the federal government. And in the division that sold into the federal government, we knew, because we'd been doing this for years, we knew that September, it was either August or September, I think it was September though, that September is the last month of the fiscal budget year for the federal government. And what that means is if you have any unspent budget, any unspent money, you have to spend it before the end of the fiscal year. Otherwise, you don't get that money back the next year. So what would happen is we would get a surge of business in that last final fiscal month of the year to just burn through all that budget. So if we were to compare, so let's just say for sake of argument here that was September, if we were to compare October's numbers against September, is that ever going to be a fair comparison? No, absolutely not. That is a horrible comparison. So you don't want to compare You need to have the context of, well, if we compare October against September, it's a really unfair comparison. So because of the seasonality involved in the federal government, we actually have to compare October against the previous October to get a real understanding of if the number for this October is good or bad, right? So this context allows you to understand seasonality. It allows you to understand trends. So you have to make sure that you're adding in this context. Without context, a number is just a number. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be up, it can be down. It's basically Schrodinger's number until you add the context. Now, let's talk a little bit about cohorts. Cohorts are how you create groups of people or groups of opportunity or groups of things based on data points that you can then compare against other cohorts. So, for example, a cohort would be MQLs from last quarter, and I want to track how they convert through the funnel and how they turn into pipeline. And that way I can compare them against MQLs from the quarter before that and the MQLs from the same quarter year over year. That's a cohort. That's cohort style reporting. Opportunities that hit the pipeline stage last month. I want to look at opportunities that hit the pipeline stage last month, and I want to be able to look at the win rates for those so that I can compare those against the opportunities that hit the pipeline stage the previous month or the same month year over year. Excuse me. Losses last year. If you've ever wanted to do loss analysis, which if you haven't wanted to do loss analysis, I highly recommend you do. But losses last year, and why did we lose them? And how does that compare against losses so far this year? And why we lose deals this year? Those are cohorts and cohort style reporting. Cohorts are super important, again, to be able to provide that context and that clarity of, are we up? Are we down? Is this good? Is this bad? Is it neutral? What's going on? Frequency unlocks context and cohorts. Without frequency, you can't do context and cohorts. Now, this is the one thing that I'm going to tell you that is most people get tripped up on this because they go, hey, I don't know what the frequency should be. So they just don't get started. That is the wrong way to do this. Just understand the first time you set your frequency, you're making an educated guess. You will adjust as you go. If you get the frequency wrong, that's okay. Just fix it and adjust and iterate and get better. The first time you launch this reporting strategy, if it looks the same 6 months after you launch the reporting strategy, I can promise you, you're missing things. It's designed to iterate over time. Again, I told you that with this one client, it took us 12 months to get to the end state. And that's because we did this the really hard way, but we iterated the entire time. And what we ended up with at the end of that process and the stuff that we're still reporting on today, it's vastly different. So it's further iterated over time, even after we completed kind of this framework. The needs of the business have changed, and so our reporting strategy has also changed. So you just have to understand that you're probably going to get some of these frequency things wrong, and that's okay. Let's just iterate as we go. Now, the last piece of reporting is the analysis. Numbers are great. It's good to know if numbers are up, if they're down, if they're good or they're bad, but that doesn't make it actionable. What makes it actionable, and keep in mind, the usefulness is a required part of this. It has to be actionable. What makes it actionable is the analysis. The analysis has to be done of these numbers to turn it into action. This is, quite frankly, the most important part, because if you don't do this, all you're doing is basically putting up a scoreboard and saying, hey, look at these numbers, look at these pretty numbers. Aren't they cool? But we can't do anything. Also, from a career perspective, a lot of people can build reports. People that also provide analysis and insights that turn those reports and that data into action, those people become an invaluable part of the organization. Those people get turned into leadership roles. This also, if you do run the analysis yourself, it puts you in this position of being almost like a historian in your organization. And to some people, that may sound really uninteresting. To me, it sounds awesome. But an example of this is, so I was working with another client, and they had a specific they had a specific form on their website that basically gave you access to like a developer sandbox that you could play around in. And we would typically see 200 signups for that sandbox in a month. And suddenly one month that spiked to like 7,000. And then the next month we had like 6,000. So for the quarter, it was over 13,000. Well, it immediately raised red flags, right? We immediately raised red flags. We kind of assumed that it was either like some sort of a spam submission or an attempt to hack into sensitive systems. So, but from a marketing analysis standpoint, what that told us is that for those months in that particular quarter, and I can tell you right now, is Q1 2017, for that quarter and those months of February and March of that quarter, you couldn't do any contextual comparisons. That those months and that quarter were just off limits because this was an anomaly. This was a weird thing that happened. It would be really unfair to compare the next quarter after we prevented this to say, oh, well, the next quarter we had, 400 submissions, whereas the previous quarter we had over 13,000. So this quarter is a failure. No, that you can't do that. As the historian, you build that history so that you can essentially say, no, if you recall, there was this big anomaly over here. So this anomaly can't actually factor into any of our reporting for this time period. We have to avoid that. Again, also being the analysis, oh my gosh, I can't speak. Being the analyst, again, reduces ad hoc requests because if you've got all this stuff planned out and you've got a meeting scheduled for Wednesday, where not only are you going to show the numbers, but you're also going to show your analysis and show how you're going to turn this into action, is anybody going to request that report from you on Monday? Absolutely not. They're going to wait for your analysis because they know that your analysis is actually where the gold lies. The data just actually gets us to the analysis. So they're just going to wait till you get your work done, and then they're going to see what your work is. So again, this is another way to reduce ad hoc requests. Now, in the frequency section, we talked a lot about context and cohorts. This is where you put these to use. So yes, you're going to have to build a deck to do the analysis and share the analysis. So in your deck, you're going to show the results for the measurement period in question. Then you're going to compare those to the previous measurement period, and you're going to compare those to the same measurement period year over year. And that ensures that you're measuring trends and factoring in that seasonality that we talked about earlier. So that's the starting point here. Now, as you populate your deck with data, you are going to find trends. You're going to find anomalies. You're going to find outliers. You're going to find things that look weird. Your job as an analyst is to not see those things and go, oh, that's weird. Your job is to ask questions about the things you see and then dig into them. It's like an investigation. You start with understanding what's happening. For example, pipeline influence for trade shows is down year over year. Okay, well, how is that happening? Well, we changed the trade shows we went to this year from last year. Okay, so why are we down? Well, the new trade shows this year aren't influencing as much pipeline as the trade shows they replaced. Okay, so we've just now found the action. We need to go back to our previous trade show mix, drop the new trade shows that don't work, and maybe bring back some of the older trade shows that we no longer went to that may have worked better. That's the action. You find the action by asking additional questions. We call this the reporting pyramid, which starts with the foundational layer, which is the what. The foundational level of this pyramid tells you what is going on in your organization. Most people that do reporting stop there. They don't go up the pyramid. But if you go to the top of the pyramid is where you get the insights and get the action. So you have to work your way up the pyramid by asking more questions. So you start with the what, then you ask the how, diagnostic reporting that informs you as to how the foundational reports came to be. And then the why, deep dive reporting that gets into the why behind why the things have happened the way they've happened. So we go back to this example here with pipeline influence for trade shows is down year over year. Well, maybe we're going to the same exact trade shows, but we've changed the way that we activate at the trade shows. So for example, we used to do speakerships and presentations, but this year we changed to happy hours and dinners. Well, maybe that's the reason why we're no longer getting the same type of pipeline from trade shows that we used to. So you would need to dig into that to try to validate that. So this is how that analysis takes you up the pyramid, gets you to figure out the exact why behind things, and then it allows you to generate those key takeaways and those insights that allow you to take action. It allows you to turn these data points that you're looking at and take them from just being interesting to turn them into being useful. Okay, so with that, there's only a couple of slides left here, but before we get into those slides, this is where I want to open the floor for any questions, comments, concerns, emotional outbursts, whatever you may have. Let's get those out into the chat or in the Q&A, and we can answer any questions or address any comments that you have.
Actually, Drew, I got a question for you. I will start. I think usually
Mhm.
people take a minute. As you were talking about reporting on the same metric, reporting period after the reporting period, what I've seen and what I personally experienced is that people start with a set of metrics, especially if it's a kind of newer marketing organization, or if it's a new marketing leader who came in, they may not know what's available. They kind of brought their heuristics and their bias of what they did before, and they want to build the same framework, right? Fair, works. They've seen that perform well, so they bring it here. So they start with a set of metrics, you report on them, and they change next quarter. And for me, and I put that in the chat, it was always like the dreaded terminology of three meaningful marketing touches. And what was behind that terminology changed continuously. At first, we were counting website visits. Then we started saying, well, they have to be three different people, not just three visits. Then we were counting ad clicks from the platform. We never had the date stamp. So, like, what I'm trying to say is just setting expectations. What's your take on setting expectations for people to think about that long term kind of consistency of what we have? When they start with good intentions, but you end up being between the rock and the hard place. You're the reporting person or reporting analyst.
Yeah, I think what happens is the reason we see so many times where like the metrics themselves change and we're like, okay, well, right now we're going to focus on these metrics, but then next quarter we're going to focus on these metrics. It's because we haven't actually done this exercise. It's because we're fishing to try to figure out what we should be reporting on and what's going to have an impact. And when you do these kind of fishing expeditions to try to figure out, hey, what should we be reporting on? That's where you're going to get that constant shifting of priorities, right? So the goal is to prevent the fishing expeditions by having a strategic approach to reporting that we're going to launch. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't iterate, right? If we decide that, hey, we thought this KPI was actually interesting and useful, but come to find out it's not. So let's just not report on that anymore. And maybe we can change it to be like this KPI instead that I might actually be a little bit more valuable. That is a natural progression of a reporting strategy. But if we're completely overhauling our reporting strategy every 3 months, I mean, you're never going to get to a place where you can generate any insights because you're just constantly looking at different things. It's essentially just, the cliche of blindfolding yourself and then trying to throw a dart at a dartboard. Like, yeah, you might hit something, but there's no strategy behind it. There's no intention behind it. Like, it's luck if you hit anything.
It's almost like you want to coach your marketing leader. That's what I learned. You want to coach people without trying to coach people, just to kind of let them know what they don't know early on. The question is, how long does it take you to realize that that's what needs to happen before they start laying the law of what it is you're going to be reporting on?
Well, yeah, and I think that's a critical role of like marketing operations professionals, is helping people understand the art of the possible, right? Certain things are possible and certain things are not possible. And as a good marketing operations or marketing operations professional or marketing analyst, you should be able to communicate the art of the possible and the art of the not possible to your leadership team. And that's why we focus time and energy on that data engineering section of this, is because the marketing ops professional or the marketing analyst is going to have the most insight into what's possible and what's not possible in your organization. And the more you can be proactive about that, the less it looks like an excuse, right? Because it's like, if you're a leader and you ask a team member for, hey, it's Friday at 3 p.m. and I need this report on my desk by Monday at 10 a.m., like, and somebody comes to you and says, oh, yeah, no, we can't report on that. Your first instinct is going to be like, okay, that's an excuse to get out of this work. But if we've already set the expectation that this is not possible, when I reply back to you, hey, Nadia, this is not possible, I'm going to reference the original strategy doc that we put together here, the original requirements doc and the data engineering section, and say, I'm going to draw your attention to slide, or to cell F15 to show you why we can't report on this and what the roadmap is to get there and why I can't have this on your desk by Monday at 10 a.m. because it's going to require 2 months to engineer the data, which has not been greenlit yet.
Thank you, Drew. I'll give the floor to Alicia's question.
Yeah, so Alicia's question is, do you have recommendations or guidelines to how to best establish clear parameters around some of those more gray area metrics, such as marketing sourced opportunities or marketing sourced clients? We get asked this often, and while in some cases is a clear success path, in many more cases it is not. As we are B2B, and one person is not the only one buying. Is there a guide to how you make agreements on these values you can share? Yeah, Alicia, this is a great one, and a lot of what you're saying here actually also kind of goes back to a misalignment in organizations about what we're reporting on and why. And not only that, it also harkens back to not having clear definitions around things. So marketing sourced opportunities or marketing sourced clients can mean different things to different people. And unless we actually go in and create a concrete definition that is agreed to by marketing, that's agreed to by SDRs, agreed to by the sales team, agreed to by the CFO, we're constantly going to be fighting mixed definitions and unclear definitions. So this is where we've got to get really, really, and I know this term carries a lot of negative connotation, but we need to get really pedantic in defining things. I typically, when I'm running these exercises, if I run across someone that says, "Well, I need to know how I need to create a report for marketing source clients," my first question is going to be, "Okay, cool. Define marketing source client." Oh, well, it's a customer that marketing sourced. Okay. Are there any time parameters in there? Like, what if marketing sourced them 10 years ago, but they just became a client yesterday? Does that still get credited for marketing sourced? Oh, I didn't think about that. You have to be super, super specific because it can mean so many different things. And that's why there's gray area. There's gray area because we haven't been as specific as we need to be in defining those things. So that's where you typically will want to create like a glossary of definitions and say, okay, well, here's a term that's going to come up in our reporting here that's going to be marketing source opportunities, and another term that's going to be marketing source clients. And here's the very, very specific definition of what a marketing sourced opportunity or a marketing source client is. And there's going to be the timelines involved because if marketing sourced somebody 10 years ago, but they just became an opportunity yesterday or a client yesterday, we don't care what happened 10 years ago. What's more important is what happened within X amount of time of when the opportunity was created or when the opportunity was closed. So my and I know I've said a lot of words, but ultimately what it boils down to is we have to clearly define these concepts. And if we don't clearly define them, that's where you get gray area. Alicia, did that help answer your question? I hope so. What other questions are there? That was a great question, Alicia. No other questions?
I think that's all we got. And looks like Alicia found your answer helpful. So thank you.
Okay, good, good, good. Oh, advice for people pleaser MOPS pros. Ooh, yes, people pleasers. I am one of those. I'm a people pleaser. Um, and so advice for people pleasers. The As people pleasers, we want to say yes all the time. Um, we have to know what we can say no to. And going through this process helps us understand what we can say no to. Specifically, if we look at the interesting and useful concept, right? If we use the interesting and useful concept and apply that to our prioritization level in the requirements and go through the data engineering piece to understand if we can actually even meet these requirements and answer these questions, that takes your no from something that is an opinion and an emotional reaction and something that's scary, and it turns it into something that is concrete. So I'm not saying no because I don't want to. I'm not saying no because I'm trying to be difficult. I'm not saying no because I've got a bunch of other work on my plate. I'm saying no because as an organization, we said that this was not a priority. Or I'm saying no because as an organization, we said this isn't useful. I'm saying no because as an organization, we've all aligned on the fact that we can't even report on this damn thing to begin with. So your no actually is something that is no longer opinion based and is fact based. So the more that you can go through this process and be really clear up front when we're going to have to say no, that takes that stress out of saying no to things. Because, well, look, this was priority number 25, we're at priority 7. Like, that's a no. Or we can't even do this thing. That's a no. You've got to the goal is to that fear of saying no comes from a fact that somebody's going to question your no. But when your no is unquestionable because it's rooted in facts and analysis and we've gone through a process, it becomes far less of of an opinion and more of just a matter of actual fact. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, I will literally give like 2 more questions or 2 more minutes for questions. But if there's no other questions, then we're going to go ahead and get to these last couple of slides. So, what I'm going to give everybody homework because I mean, what good would a workshop be without any kind of homework? Oh, we do have another question. Wade's got a question. In your experience, what is the single biggest point of failure in this process for organizations? Is it most often a lack of clear requirements, data engineering hurdles, or an inability to move from reporting data to providing true analysis and insight? Ooh, Wade, that is a good one. I honestly think the biggest challenge to executing this process, the biggest failure point, is actually getting everybody to align on what the requirements are. Once we align on the requirements, a lot of the rest of this falls into place because we the questions come from the requirements. The data engineering comes from the requirements and the questions. The frequency comes from the requirements and the questions. The cohorts and the context comes from the frequency, which comes from the requirements and the questions. So the biggest point of failure is actually getting everybody to agree on requirements because everybody ends up wanting their own specific, well, I want this requirement and I want to make this the top priority. Okay, okay. Yes, I understand that you want your needs to be top priority, but as an organization, we need to agree and have some sort of an accord about what is going to be the top priority. So, in my opinion, in my experience, that is the biggest challenge is trying to get everybody's requirements in there, make sure that we're, staying both interesting and useful, and then also making sure that the prioritization is right because that's where opinions come into play there. And anytime there's opinions come into play, then you get into politics and all this stuff, and that's just a nightmare. So that is going to be the yeah. It's not a wish list. We aren't wish casting here. This is what do we need to be able to report on to be able to do better marketing. Okay, so balancing reporting on metrics that are strategically important to leadership, like pipeline influence, with more operational metrics that drive day-to-day decisions. Yeah, absolutely. That's that whole usefulness concept. That's how you balance that. Is can we actually make meaningful change on this if it use because of this KPI or data point? If we can't make meaningful change, then it gets deprioritized. Once you get past all the stuff that's like the top priorities and you get to those last little items, those last few items that are optional, you can still build those. If you've got time and you're bored and you got nothing else going on, which I mean, honestly, who does? But if you do, you can still build those. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to build those at all. It just means they get kicked to the bottom. They get kicked to the bottom of the list. And if we have time, we'll build them. But we're not going to prioritize. All right. With that, with the last couple of minutes here, we are going to assign everybody some homework because you got to have homework after a workshop. So the homework assignment is to write out 2 requirements, to write out a minimum of 2 questions per requirement, do the data engineering piece for the questions and the requirements, and to set the frequency of those requirements and questions. Um, if you would like, when you get done with your homework, if you even do your homework, you don't have to. But if you would like, if you do your homework and you would like, you are welcome to send me the results of your homework. And I will basically kind of like, grade you or give you some feedback or maybe steer you in a different direction. So you're welcome to do that if you want. You're welcome to send it to me if you want. You don't have to, but you're welcome to.